To truly understand the legend of Elon Musk, you must ignore the rockets landing in the ocean, you must ignore the $44 billion Twitter acquisition, and you must ignore the memes. You have to travel back in time to the cold, gray spring of 2018. This is the story of the moment Tesla actually died. Not struggled, not missed a quarterly target, but strictly, mathematically died. The media rarely explains how close it truly was, but in early 2018, Tesla was approximately 3 weeks away from total corporate liquidation. The company was burning cash at a rate that would make a pyromaniac sweat. Hundreds of millions of dollars were evaporating every single week. They had bet the entire existence of the company, the farm, the house, and the future, on one single product, the Model 3. This car was supposed to be the iPhone moment for the automotive industry, a mass-market electric vehicle that would kill the internal combustion engine forever. But there was a catastrophic problem. Elon Musk, in a fit of supreme arrogance, had tried to be too smart. He had tried to reinvent the very concept of manufacturing. He called it the alien dreadnought, a vision of a factory so automated, so futuristic and so fast that air resistance would be the biggest factor slowing down production. He believed that humans were slow, unreliable, and prone to injury, so he fired the humans and hired an army of robots. He filled the Fremont factory with thousands of complex machines, robots to weld, robots to paint, robots to move parts, and even robots to check the quality of other robots. It was a symphony of engineering hubris, and it was a complete, unmitigated disaster. The robots were precise, yes, but they were stupid. They couldn't handle the variance of real-world materials. If a wire was 2 millimeters out of place, the robot would stop the entire assembly line. The factory, which needed to produce 5,000 cars a week just to break even and pay the bills, was barely squeezing out 2,000. Every car that rolled off the line was a financial loss. The sharks on Wall Street smelled the blood in the water. Short sellers were piling in with billions of dollars in bets, screaming on CNBC that Tesla was a fraud, a Ponzi scheme that could never scale. Inside the factory, the atmosphere was apocalyptic. Executives were fleeing the sinking ship. Engineers were burning out and sleeping in their cars. The board of directors was panic-stricken, watching the bank account drain toward zero. Elon Musk looked at the chaos he had created and realized that money couldn't fix this. Strategy meetings couldn't fix this. The only way to save the company was to declare war on his own machine. So, he stopped going home, he stopped showering, and he prepared to enter the darkest psychological tunnel of his life. The image of a billionaire CEO sleeping on a factory floor has become a piece of Silicon Valley folklore, a romanticized meme about hard work. But the reality of those nights in Fremont was not romantic, it was grotesque. Elon didn't sleep in a bed and he rarely used a couch. He deliberately chose to sleep under his desk or in a glass-walled conference room right in the center of the manufacturing floor. He did this for a very specific psychological reason. He wanted every single worker, from the shift supervisors to the janitors, to see his unconscious body when they walked in. He wanted them to know that while they were grinding through 12-hour shifts, their general was grinding through 22. He wore the same clothes for 3 days straight, usually a black t-shirt covered in dust and grease. He smelled like solvent, burnt metal, and stale coffee. His diet consisted of Red Bull and adrenaline. This was the era where demon mode was born. Elon's personality fractured under the pressure. He became a manic problem solver who prowled the production line like a predator, looking for bottlenecks. If a sensor was slowing down the line by 2 seconds, he didn't call a meeting with the engineering team. He ripped the sensor out with his own hands. If a manager couldn't answer a technical question about a bolt torque setting within 3 seconds, they were fired on the spot. It was a reign of terror, but it was born out of a desperate realization. His alien dreadnought was actually a prison. The robots were killing Tesla. There was one specific robot that became the symbol of this failure, known infamously as the Flufferbot. Its entire job was to pick up a piece of fiberglass sound-dampening fluff and place it on top of the battery pack. It was a multi-million-dollar piece of German engineering. But the fluff was soft, and the robot was rigid. It failed constantly, dropping the fluff or jamming the line. Elon stared at this machine, watching it destroy his company, and had an epiphany. He walked up to the line, grabbed the fluff, placed it manually in 2 seconds, and shouted, "Why is this robot here?" He ordered the team to rip it out. Then he ripped out the conveyor belt system, then the automated bolting stations. In a moment of supreme humility, the man who wanted to merge with AI tweeted one of the most important admissions in business history. Excessive automation at Tesla was a mistake. To be precise, my mistake. Humans are underrated. It was a pivot that defied all logic. While the rest of the world was racing toward automation, Elon Musk was frantically hiring humans to replace the robots he had just installed. But the toll on his mind was catastrophic. He spent his 47th birthday alone in the factory, working a 24-hour shift, staring at the ceiling, hallucinating from exhaustion. Friends were worried he was going to have a heart attack or a total psychotic break. But Elon knew something the short sellers didn't. The bottleneck wasn't the car. The bottleneck was his own ego. And by killing his ego, by admitting he was wrong, he had just unlocked the speed they needed. By June 2018, Elon had made the psychological breakthrough, replacing the failing robots with human hands, but immediately hit a physical wall. The Fremont factory was full. It was bursting at the seams. Every square inch of the 5 million square foot facility was occupied by the failed automated lines, the stamping presses, and the inventory piles. They needed a completely new general assembly line immediately to hit the target of 5,000 cars a week. In the traditional automotive world of Ford or Toyota, building a new assembly hall is a massive undertaking. It takes 18 months of planning, zoning permits, concrete foundations, and perfectly climate-controlled environments. Elon Musk had about 2 weeks. If they didn't hit the production target by the end of June, the cash would run out, the credit lines would freeze, and the doors would close. So, in a move that would have gotten any other CEO fired for insanity, Elon walked outside, pointed to the employee parking lot, and said, "Build it there." He didn't order a building. He ordered a tent. Technically, it was a sprung structure, a massive aluminum frame covered in heavy-duty canvas, but to the rest of the world it looked like a circus tent, or a field hospital for a war zone. And in a way, it was both. The construction was frantic. Teams worked 24 hours a day, paving the asphalt, erecting the pillars, and running massive power cables across the open ground. They scavenged parts from other factories. They used scrap metal to build makeshift conveyor belts. It was the ultimate MacGyver moment on a billion-dollar scale. When the media helicopters flew overhead and broadcast images of the tent, the financial world exploded with laughter. CNBC anchors mocked it openly. Short sellers called it the tent of doom. They argued with smug confidence that you cannot build high-precision luxury vehicles in a drafty, dusty tent exposed to the California heat and wind. They claimed it was final proof that Tesla was an amateur operation, a company held together by duct tape and delusion. But inside that tent, something miraculous was happening. Because they weren't constrained by the rigid architecture of the old factory, the engineers could innovate instantly. If a workstation wasn't efficient, they didn't need a jackhammer to move it. They just dragged it across the asphalt. The environment was brutal, it was hot, it was loud, and the air smelled of sweat and determination, but it was fast. GA4, General Assembly Line 4, as it was officially named, became the most efficient line in the entire company. It stripped away the bureaucracy. It stripped away the pretension. It was just humans, tools, and metal. Elon Musk practically lived in that tent. He walked the line with a torque wrench, fixing issues himself, his face covered in soot. He famously headbutted a car once to check the panel gap tolerance, though some say he headbutted it in frustration. The tent became the physical manifestation of Tesla's hardcore culture. While GM and Volkswagen were sitting in air-conditioned boardrooms planning their EV strategies for 2025, Tesla was in a parking lot, building the future with bare hands and sheer will. The short sellers were laughing at the aesthetics, but they missed the point entirely. The tent proved that Tesla was not a car company. It was a startup that refused to die. And as the end of June approached, the cars started rolling out of that canvas cathedral faster than anyone thought possible. The laughter on Wall Street was about to turn into a terrified silence. The final week of June 2018 was not a normal week of corporate business. It was a desperate military campaign. In Tesla lore, it is known simply as the Burst Week. The objective was singular and non-negotiable: produce 5,000 Model 3s in 7 days. If they hit the number, they proved to the world that the company could scale, the cash flow would turn positive, and the short sellers would be crushed. If they missed, even by a few cars, the financing would likely dry up, the stock would collapse, and the company would die. The atmosphere inside the factory, and the sweltering tent outside, was electric, bordering on hysterical. Shifts were extended to 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours. Office workers from the finance, HR, and legal departments were pulled from their air-conditioned desks and ordered to the factory floor to help sand down bumpers, peel plastic, or move parts. It was all hands on deck, in the most literal sense. Elon Musk was everywhere. He was a ghost haunting the machine. He was calculating the takt time, the speed at which a car comes off the line, down to the fraction of a second. At one point in the middle of the week, a catastrophic bottleneck emerged in the paint shop. The paint wasn't drying fast enough to keep up with the speed of the assembly line. A normal CEO would have accepted the delay and missed the target. Elon refused to accept the laws of thermodynamics. He ordered the engineering team to build a massive, specialized heating tunnel overnight to cook the paint faster. They hacked the software to run the painting robots faster than their factory safety ratings allowed. They were redlining the entire organism, pushing machinery and humans past their breaking point. The physical toll was immense. People were passing out from heat and exhaustion. Empty Red Bull cans littered the floor like shell casings in a trench. But there was a strange, manic camaraderie. They knew the whole world was watching. They knew the New York Times had already pre-written their obituary. As the hours ticked down on Saturday night, June 30th, the count was agonizingly close. 4,900, 4,950. The tension was suffocating. Finally, at approximately 5 a.m. on Sunday morning, July 1st, car number 5031 rolled off the assembly line. The factory didn't just clap, it exploded. It was a primal scream of relief from thousands of people who hadn't slept in days. Elon Musk, looking like a man who had returned from the dead, stood in the middle of the chaos, surrounded by the grime-covered workers of GA4. They took a photo that is now historic, hundreds of exhausted people raising their fists in the air in front of a shiny black Model 3 under the harsh fluorescent lights. They had done the impossible. They had built 5,000 cars in a week, largely inside a tent, while the entire financial establishment bet against them. Elon sent an email to the whole company at that moment. "I think we just became a real car company." It was a moment of pure triumph, but as the adrenaline faded, a new reality set in. They had survived the sprint, but they had forgotten something crucial. They had built the cars, but they had absolutely no way to deliver them. The champagne corks had barely hit the floor after the production victory when Elon Musk realized he had made a classic strategic error. He had solved the hard problem and completely ignored the boring one. He had spent billions figuring out how to build 5,000 cars a week, but he had spent 0 minutes figuring out how to move 5,000 cars a week. Fremont, California, is not designed to be a massive export hub. It doesn't have the rail lines or the highway infrastructure of Detroit. Suddenly, Tesla had thousands of shiny Model 3s pouring out of the factory like water from a burst dam, and they had absolutely nowhere to go. They filled the factory holding lots instantly. Then they filled the employee parking lots. Then Tesla had to rent massive fields in the desert just to park the inventory. Short sellers began flying drones over these lots and analyzing satellite imagery. They posted photos of thousands of dusty Teslas baking in the sun and called it the graveyard. They spun a conspiracy theory that the demand wasn't real, that Elon was building cars nobody wanted just to fake the production numbers. The truth was dumber and more frustrating. There weren't enough car carrier trucks in North America to handle the surge. The logistics industry was a dinosaur, used to the slow, predictable rhythms of Ford and GM. They couldn't handle Elon's burst. So Tesla entered delivery hell. It was a crisis of flow. If they couldn't deliver the cars to customers and get the paperwork signed before the end of the quarter, they couldn't book the revenue. If they couldn't book the revenue, they would show a massive financial loss and the stock would crash, rendering the production victory meaningless. It was a race against the calendar. Elon once again went into first principles mode. He looked at the shortage of car carriers and decided to simply bypass the industry. He started buying trucking companies outright. He ordered the engineering team to design and build their own trailers over the weekend, using scrap metal from the factory. But the most insane part of this story, the part that proves Tesla is different from any other company, is the Tesla Army. In a move that is unique in the history of capitalism, Elon put out a call for help on Twitter. And people answered. Tesla owners, customers who had paid $50,000 for a car, showed up at delivery centers to volunteer. They weren't getting paid. They were there to help new owners set up their Bluetooth, teach them how to charge, and move cars around the lots. Imagine buying a Mercedes and then spending your weekend working for Mercedes for free. It sounds like a cult, and perhaps it is, but it worked. This volunteer army, combined with Elon's logistics guerrilla warfare, managed to clear the backlog. They were delivering cars at midnight. They were delivering cars to people's driveways at 3 a.m. It was chaotic, unprofessional, and absolutely magnificent. By the time the quarter ended, the graveyard was empty. The cars were with the customers. And the revenue was on the books. Elon had proven that he could not only build the machine, but he could force the world to accept it. But just as he thought he was safe, he picked up his phone and typed 9 words that would nearly destroy everything he had built. By August 2018, Elon Musk had survived production hell and logistics hell. He had saved the company twice in 6 months. Any rational human being would have taken a vacation. He should have slept for a week. Instead, his brain, fried by months of 120-hour work weeks and an intense boiling hatred for the short sellers who were harassing him, short-circuited. On August 7th, while driving to the airport, Elon pulled out his phone and typed 9 words that would cost him $40 million and nearly his entire empire. Am considering taking Tesla private at $420. Funding secured. The number 4I-20 was a joke, a juvenile marijuana reference calculated to amuse his girlfriend at the time, Grimes. But the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, didn't find it funny. The stock market exploded. Short sellers lost billions in minutes. But there was a catastrophic problem. Funding was not secured. Elon had held loose conversations with the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund about a buyout, but nothing was signed. Nothing was official. In the eyes of the federal government, this wasn't a joke, it was securities fraud. It was market manipulation. The victory lap turned into a legal nightmare instantly. The SEC sued Elon Musk, seeking to ban him from serving as an officer or director of any public company forever. Imagine the tragedy of that. After sleeping on the floor, after building the tent, after saving the company with his bare hands, he was about to be fired by the government because of a weed joke on Twitter. The following weeks were the darkest of his life. In a now famous interview with the New York Times, Elon broke down. He choked up, admitting, "This has been the most difficult and painful year of my career." He described nights where he couldn't sleep without heavy medication, specifically Ambien. He looked broken. The board of directors was furious. The investors were terrified. To save Tesla from a long legal war that could bankrupt it, Elon had to swallow his massive pride. He settled with the SEC. He agreed to pay a $20 million fine personally. Tesla paid another $20 million, but the hardest pill to swallow was that he was forced to step down as chairman of the board. He could remain CEO, but he needed a babysitter. He also had to have his tweets pre-approved by a lawyer, a rule he has violated repeatedly since. It was a public humiliation. The media declared that Elon was unstable, a liability, a man who had flown too close to the sun. But they missed the underlying truth. The tweet was a desperate cry for help. He wanted to take the company private to escape the short sellers, to escape the quarterly pressure, to just build cars in peace. He failed to go private, but he succeeded in something else. He hardened himself. The fire of 2018 burned away the last remnants of the polite billionaire. What emerged from the ashes was the Elon we know today, the man who doesn't care about laws, norms, or the SEC, the man who realized that if he could survive 2018, he could survive anything. The scars of 2018 never truly healed, but they transformed into titanium armor. Less than 18 months after nearly going bankrupt, after the tent, the floor sleeping, and the soul-crushing SEC lawsuits, Elon Musk stood on a stage in Shanghai, China. The setting was surreal. Just a year earlier, the site was literally a muddy watermelon farm. In any other country, building a 5 million square foot advanced manufacturing facility would take 3 to 5 years of bureaucracy and construction. But Elon, fueled by the trauma of production hell, applied what he called Tesla speed combined with China speed. They broke ground in January and were delivering cars by December. It was a record-breaking 10-month sprint that defied every law of industrial globalism. When Elon took the stage to hand over the first keys to Chinese customers, something shifted in his public persona. He didn't look like the broken, tearful man from the New York Times interview. He looked like a man who had just escaped a death sentence and realized he was now the judge. As the music started, Elon began to dance. It was a goofy, uncoordinated, dad dance. He stripped off his heavy black blazer, tossed it into the crowd, and shimmied across the stage in a black t-shirt. The internet exploded with memes laughing at his awkwardness. But they missed the profound symbolism of that moment. That wasn't a dance of arrogance. It was a dance of absolute liberation. It was the physical release of years of compressed cortisol, legal threats, and the constant shadow of failure. Giga Shanghai wasn't just another factory. It was Tesla's life insurance policy. By diversifying away from the chaos of the Fremont plant, Tesla became a global powerhouse. The manufacturing lessons learned under the tent in California were digitized and perfected in China. The alien dreadnought dream finally came true, but with a crucial twist. It was built around the human workers, not instead of them. The efficiency was terrifying. Tesla began producing cars at a margin that made Ford and Toyota look like non-profits. The short sellers, who had bet billions that Tesla would die in the mud of Fremont, were systematically annihilated. In 2020, Tesla's stock embarked on a legendary short squeeze that created more wealth than almost any other company in financial history. It went up 700% in a single year. Elon Musk didn't just become a billionaire again. He became the richest person on the planet. But as he stood there in Shanghai watching the cars roll off the line every 40 seconds, he knew the war had changed him. He was no longer the optimistic engineer trying to save the world with a smile. He was a wartime CEO who had tasted blood and realized that in the world of high-stakes technology, you either sleep on the floor and win, or you sleep in a bed and lose. The story of Elon Musk sleeping under his desk is often told as a triumph of spirit, but we must be honest about the wreckage it left behind. The 2018 Model 3 hell didn't just produce a car. It forged a new and controversial corporate religion. It created the hardcore DNA that now defines everything Elon touches, from SpaceX to X. The lessons learned on that cold factory floor in Fremont became a brutal blueprint. If you want to achieve the impossible, you must be willing to sacrifice everything: your sleep, your sanity, and your comfort. Tesla became immortal, not because it had the best technology, but because it had the highest pain tolerance. While engineers at legacy car companies were clocking out at 5 p.m. to go home to their families, Tesla engineers were solving fluid dynamics problems at 3 a.m. under a circus tent in a parking lot. This is the Musk paradox. To save the world with sustainable energy, he had to become a tyrant of productivity. He proved that in the age of infinite distraction, sheer unadulterated focus is the ultimate superpower. Critics today still attack his leadership style. They call it toxic, they call it unsustainable, and they call it a violation of work-life balance. And from a normal human perspective, they are right. It is toxic. It is insane. But as Elon often says, nobody ever changed the world on 40 hours a week. The results speak for themselves. The company that was 3 weeks from death is now the gravity well of the entire automotive industry. Every electric car you see on the road today exists because a man refused to leave a factory until his brain started to hallucinate. The Model 3 hell was the fire that burned away the pretenders. It separated the people who wanted a job from the people who wanted to build history. Today, when you look at a Tesla, you aren't just looking at a vehicle. You are looking at a monument to obsession. You're looking at the physical evidence of what happens when a human being decides that failure is not an option, even if it costs him his soul. Elon Musk stared into the abyss of bankruptcy, and instead of flinching, he moved his desk into the abyss and took a nap. And that is why no matter how many tweets he sends or how many controversies he stirs, the world can never truly count him out. Because you cannot defeat a man who is willing to suffer more than you are. This is the reality of the frontier. It is dirty, it is painful, and it is rarely fair. Now, I have a question for you, and I want an honest answer in the comments. Would you do it? If you were building the future, would you sleep on a factory floor and sacrifice your health to save your dream? Or is no company worth that much of a human life? Type mission if you think the sacrifice was worth it, or balance if you think Elon has gone too far. I'll be reading the comments to see where you stand. If this deep dive showed you a side of the Tesla story you've never seen, hit the like button and share this video with someone who thinks success is easy. And don't forget, our next episode is the most explosive one yet. We are covering the go F-fuck yourself war between Elon and Disney's Bob Iger. You need to see how the lessons from the factory floor are being applied to the war for free speech. Subscribe to Musk Untold. The future is being written in real time. We'll see you in the next one.